to have a Labour Environment Campaign event that is standing room only, and really, I think, a testament to how seriously members within the party, our partners within the Labour movement, truly take the need for us to act now on climate change. Our slight late start and our empty chair is we're just trying to track Sarah Jones down, who's coming on, obviously from another engagement. So what I'm going to do is I am going to start the event, because not only are you in the room, but there's a lot of people watching on Twitter and Facebook. So we want to ensure that we are sticking through to time. Okay, so today's event. So I'm really excited about this discussion, and I hope it's going to be as great as my excitement is, because ever since I've been campaigning on green issues, ever since my professional role, asking where are the real jobs? Where are the real jobs that are relevant to people's skills? We can talk about good jobs, but are they union jobs? Are they actually jobs in the right communities, the communities that are at risk and losing jobs? Where are the gaps? What jobs are going to go? What jobs are going to grow? And actually, just talking to Duncan earlier, where's the workforce plan? How can we actually ensure this transition isn't like other transitions, where actually what we have, and certainly in my region, the West Midlands, we have communities who've not only been failed by the last transition, but the transition before that and the transition before that. And they are the very people at the moment that the Tories are trying to respond to. Those are the ones who will fear change. Those are the ones who will see any suggestion of change. Green jobs means jobs gone for them. And until we have answers about fair, just, good jobs, we're not going to take people with us. So very much, I'm really delighted to start today with a key leader in the trade union movement, and equally a union that actually represents some of those individuals who will also have the power and the influence, we hope, to actually help shape that transition and ensure that the innovation does actually find its way through to this transitional pathway. So I'll hand over to Sue Ferns, Senior Deputy General Secretary, Prospect Union. Thanks, Sue.
Thank you very much. Look, Prospect is a proud energy union, and we are really pleased that we're representing growing numbers of members across the renewable sector in companies like Orsted, in RWE, SSE, and others. And we absolutely start from the position that a Labour government must work with unions and businesses to ensure that clean energy jobs are good jobs. And that's really important, because the energy transition can create a significant number of jobs around the UK, which is really important. But we're very clear that they have to be good jobs, good quality, and unionised jobs. That's the way we will maximise the opportunities from the net zero transition and attract the skilled workers we need to deliver a decarbonised energy system. But let me take you outside of this room for a moment. In August, we commissioned More in Common to examine public attitudes to green jobs. And we held 2 focus groups, one in West Cumbria and one in Great Yarmouth. And some key headlines from that. Participants in those focus groups were unfamiliar with the concept of green jobs, and few of them associated green jobs with the energy sector. Many had concerns that green jobs wouldn't be accessible to them due to a belief that they would require retraining and that they'd be poorly paid, so they just didn't see themselves in this space. That said, there wasn't any opposition to green jobs, but participants were much more focused on the need to create good jobs in their local area. And I think this reinforces our view that politicians and employers need to focus on improving the quality of jobs as well as the quantity of jobs in clean energy. And we increasingly are talking about clean energy jobs rather than green jobs, which should be green jobs, but we have to talk, as just been said, in a way that makes this a real agenda for people. So you've got, I think, all of you, copies of the report that we've published today on delivering good, clean energy jobs. And it's clear to us there are some barriers to doing this, including in the renewables sector. So job creation, so far we haven't seen as many jobs created from the renewables rollout as we'd expected, with UK employment not rising in the last few years. I think the experience of the latest auction round really adds to those concerns. Pay is an issue for some people working in renewables. I'm pleased to say that we have good collective bargaining agreements with some employers, but not all employers. We need to pay attention to health and safety. Absolutely, right across the energy sector, skills and the availability of the right skills is a key issue, because there are overlapping skill shortages in areas such as engineering, project management and data science. And these are in demand across the economy, but they're also vital to meeting our energy goals. There's an issue around diversity of the workforce. 1 in 5 workers in offshore wind are women. Fewer than 1 in 10 are people of colour. We know that's a broader issue as well. And in terms of worker voice, our agreement with Orsted is a good example of good practice in the industry, which we would like to see others follow. So, a Labour government, which we all hope for, can use a range of tools to act on these issues. So, what do we want to see Labour do? We want to see them drive public and private investment into clean energy. We absolutely support Labour's plans for direct public investment through Great British Energy, and we want to see Great British Energy have an explicit mandate to create good jobs. Alongside that, we need a plan to unlock private investment, including by reforming planning and permitting and developing a strategic approach to network upgrades. That's really important. And we want to see good jobs conditions attached to government support for clean energy. So Labour's British Jobs Bonus, which would introduce non-price factors into the auction process, is welcome. We'd like to see it have a clear mechanism to ensure the creation of good quality jobs is incentivised. We believe there should be a clean energy workforce strategy, because overlapping skill shortages can't be and won't be resolved by employers alone. Very clear message from us is that a Labour government has a lot to learn from the US Department of Energy's Office of Energy Jobs, which plays a vital role in coordinating efforts to deliver high quality clean energy jobs, diversify the workforce and address skill shortages. And of course, we want to see workers empowered and given a seat at the table. We absolutely support Labour's New Deal for working people. In the context of this sector, we want to see the plans developed there. And what we want is access to be able to talk to those workers who are not already unionised, and to talk to them about good quality jobs and the way that we as unions can support them to have good quality jobs. And that means having access to those workplaces. Look, colleagues, we've got a common agenda here. We are all committed to the energy transition. I think clean energy is the issue, or an issue of the moment at this conference. And so it should be, because we are at a critical point here in the development. The government's stop-start policies are holding us all back. We all know how vital it is to make this progress. So we look very much to working with the Labour government to ensure that we really step up and make progress quickly.
Thank you, Sue. And that really resonates in many ways about how language is really important. Half the time we think that we're saying things that people are okay with, and actually green jobs could mean something totally different. I know when I've gone out, people think I'm talking about groundsman type jobs and things like that. So I think, again, it's something as a sector we need to pay more care to, that we use a language that is accessible and understandable. Okay, so now we're going to hand over to Duncan Clark from Orsted, who are really at the vanguard of driving renewable energy here. And Duncan very much was talking earlier about some of the work he's been at the helm in Grimsby. So I hope we can hear a little bit from you, Duncan, on the Orsted experience and what that means for jobs and places, maybe.
Thank you so much, Lisa. Thank you to Sarah. Thank you to Prospect for this opportunity. And Sue, thank you for that call out on the relationship, which is one that we really value in Orsted. And just a very brief introduction to Orsted. We are best known for being a leader in offshore wind power. We currently produce about 7% of the UK's or GB's electricity from about a dozen offshore wind farms that we operate around here. Just over 10 years, we have built up a direct employee workforce here of about 1,500 people and thousands more in our network of enterprises that we work with. Key bases for us in Barrow, in Grimsby, here in Liverpool, and increasingly spreading out also into Scotland and elsewhere. So our network of supply chain companies here is more than 200. About 45 of those also come with us internationally. So a key point about the jobs discussion we need to have is that element of export for it, because that is the nature of the supply chains and the nature of the business that we're talking about here. So from the point of view of Orsted, we want to work with government, we want to work with the unions, we want to create those thousands of green jobs. And the first thing I would say is, while I and Orsted talk mainly from the perspective of decarbonising our electricity production with renewables, the green jobs and the net zero journey is one that encompasses lots of different sectors. It's far broader than that, and on a much bigger scale as well. I think offshore wind power itself supports tens of thousands of jobs today, and will double or treble by the end of the decade. So what do we need to do to create more of that? Well, first and foremost, we need to carry on building, and we need to accelerate the pace of building. We need those big infrastructure projects, that investment commitment. We need to do much more to invest in the skills here in the UK to support that growth. It won't happen without that investment, and we need to build much more of the supply chain so that the components and the services that are needed to execute it are available, because again, it won't happen if that's not in place. And to make that happen, we really do need a proper industrial strategy. We need industry and government working together alongside the workforce, alongside the unions. It's only in that coordinated way that we can make it happen. And we've seen that recently. We saw with the new investment in an offshore wind foundation facility on Teesside, a company called SARE that we worked with over years. And it was only by bringing together local and regional government, the local mayor, central government, us as customers, and an ambitious forward-looking company that made a £300 million investment in what will be a world-leading manufacturing facility for these enormous foundation structures. They're essentially very strong steel tubes, a couple of thousand tons each, and up to 100 meters long. So it's mega engineering. It's something we should be absolutely proud of putting into place there on an industrial brownfield site. And finally, if we're going to create all of these green jobs, we've also got to work in combination with decarbonisation of our heavy industry. You know, there are parts of what we do, big employers, big parts of our economy today, and we've got to go on that journey together. So a big part of it is low carbon power in our system. We've also got to look at the solutions for other businesses. That's partly hydrogen, it's partly other interventions as well. The good news is we're not starting from scratch. We're underway. We do need new ambition. We do need new policy. We need that to move to the next level. We're now more than ever that I can remember competing for these investments. It's become a game of creating the frameworks, creating the certainty, the foresight, the predictability that means this is the place that people want to invest. This is the place that people want to develop, build and grow their business. So there's very real challenges today, particularly in offshore wind. We maybe come back to that later, but actually feel very positive that it can be done and that we can create a thriving industry, thriving business, and really great quality green and low carbon jobs.
Okay, thank you very much for that, Duncan. Okay, so Duncan and Sue have really talked about the need for new relationships, the need to respect, recognise workers, the need to use language that workers can understand and we can all understand, the need to actually, the partnership, the respect of partnership, the need for scale, the absolute need for scale, and the need to actually develop that skills pathway so that workers in work can transition through as well as workers out. And again, probably one of the most important things is the transition of workers in work to these new areas. And fundamentally, Duncan's touched on, and I think many in the room will share, the absolute desire for an industrial strategy that is actually an industrial strategy. So I couldn't be more delighted than to introduce Sarah Jones, MP, the new Minister for Industry and Decarbonisation. I am sad enough to be really excited when you got your job. It was like, somebody's finally got it. So we're all really want to hear from you, Sarah, on how are you going to make it different then for us this time around?
Thank you very much, and thanks to Sarah, which I think is the same age as me and has been working as a very important part of Labour's thinking in this area for many decades. And thanks to everyone on the panel, and apologies for lateness. I was in Rachel Reeves's speech, which was quite extraordinary, quite emotional, and very powerful, and centred around how we get good investment and good jobs in our country, and how we give Britain its future back. So the brief that I have is a new one, and it is linking the Department of Business with the Department of Net Zero. So I sit in Johnny Reynolds' team and in Ed Miliband's team, and the purpose of that is that you can't deliver net zero unless it's about good jobs, and you can't deliver good jobs and take the opportunities of the future without tackling net zero and delivering that. So I'm really pleased to be in the role. I am new. There will be people in the room who know more than me. I will say that now, and we're very much in listening mode. But the kind of the challenge from conference that Rachel set out today in terms of answering that challenge was, you know, we all know there's been 13 years of chaos, of lack of investment, of managed decline, of public services crumbling, of a failure to grasp the opportunities of net zero and the future. Nowhere is that clearer than in offshore, where we had, you know, nobody going for the contracts for difference, nobody bidding last year, which is an absolute disaster for the economy, and shows where kind of a vacuum of planning and a vacuum of a strategy from government has meant that we are not making the most of these opportunities. So the challenge is, you know, what are we going to do as a Labour government? And I think there are several things. The first thing that's really important to say is fiscal discipline and an economy that is secure and that people understand and will not shift. So all of the announcements that Rachel's made today, and looking at the Office of Value for Money, giving more control to the Office of Budget Responsibility, which she just announced today. So making sure we can never have a return to what happened under Liz Truss is the starting point. The second, you know, real pillar here is that we want to work in partnership with investors, with local government, with trade unions, and with all the organisations that are going to be part of the solution. Partnership is not just a nice to have. We genuinely believe we cannot deliver the change we need to see without walking hand in hand with business. And I have been meeting with people this week who are transitioning and doing great things in America. And we all look to what Biden is doing, of course, with his IRA and his other legislation and the huge investment that is flooding in now to America, the billions of pounds worth of investment that's coming in and the 100,000 jobs in the first year that has created. And what is really interesting is some of the relationships with the trade unions that are going alongside that investment and are about creating the incentives for business to make sure we have good jobs and good high quality jobs as well. So we want to learn those lessons, and that's why Angela Rayner has her entire New Deal for working people, giving people rights. It's why we have a huge skills agenda, which is about, yes, looking at the apprenticeship levy and changing that because it's too clunky at the moment. We're not spending that money properly, and indeed we're not actually spending the money that's been allocated at all, but also using the whole further education world to make sure we're skilling people up in the right ways for the jobs that we need. And then it's not about rocket science, it's about removing the barriers to growth, and we all have a role to do that, whether that's buying the cabling so that we can extend the national grid, whether that's changing the planning system so that we can be really clear that we want to take people with us, we want to give them, so if we expect, as Rachel has said today, if we expect to put really important national infrastructure in your area, you should expect something in return, you should get cheaper energy, and that's a really important part of the picture. Devolution is a really important part of the picture as well. We need to devolve some of these powers so that local areas who know best about what is needed are there. And the investment that we're looking at, the £28 billion from the middle of the first parliamentary term, is broken down into lots of different plans that will help deliver the jobs that we need for the future. So whether that's the National Wealth Fund, where Rachel's expectation is that for £1 we invest, we get £3 of investment from the private sector, or whether it's Great British Jobs, which is about incentivising jobs and growth in the areas we need the most, so that the whole of the country can benefit from the investment that the government is putting in, and crucially the private sector is putting in too. So there are many parts to this, and there are many ways where we can ensure that we have a really strong partnership between business, which is ready to have these conversations. We have had, and Rachel has had, many conversations with business about how we can incentivise them to invest in the UK, but alongside our trade union movement. And we have had many conversations with them about how we make sure we give people good jobs and good futures. I was talking to a trade union member in Hinkley Point, where there are 10,000 people being bussed in literally a day into that site, and talking about the women in construction roles that they have there, and other programs that make sure those jobs are high skilled and good and going to a diverse selection of people as well. So there is much to be done. I think this is the one area where the difference between the Conservatives and the Labour Party could not be more stark, and the choice for the electorate could not be more stark. And I think if we do this right, and it will be very difficult, but if we do this right, we can actually build the future that we want to see and give Britain, as we are saying, its future back. Thank you very much.
Okay, so plenty of opportunity, an absolute willingness to grasp the challenge and try and find the solutions. I suppose it's very much over to our audience to question maybe the practicalities, the realities. How? What does that really mean? I will take, have I got roving mics?
There we go. Who's going to go to first?
Can I take the woman there, please? Thanks, Matt.
Hi, my name's Ria from Ashfield. I just wanted to know what can be done to ensure that places like Ashfield, where we have a history, Ashfield and the surrounding areas, I should say, have a history of supplying coal and the nation's energy back in the day. What can be done to ensure places like Ashfield and the surrounding areas aren't left behind on this strategy? And how can Labour work with the unions to ensure that the clean energy strategy hits the right places so that everybody can benefit and it doesn't just get focused in a few key areas?
Absolutely critical question. I'm going to take three I will take the two gentlemen at the back, very back, Matt, so you can, and then we'll hopefully have time for a couple more rounds.
Go first.
Thank you. This is for Duncan, actually. If you could be a bit more as specific as you can on the skills gap that Orsted is facing. You're obviously a large company. You've got the resources to invest in skills. What exactly would you need from government when it comes to plugging the skills gap for your company?
Okay,
Hi there, Jonathan Leake. I'm the energy editor at the Daily Telegraph, and it's just a question for the guy from Orsted, actually, which is, from memory, you pulled out of constructing one wind farm and didn't bid for the recent allocation round, and I think this is all to do with the strike price. So, what do you think the price of offshore wind should be at? What should the strike price be, and what mechanism do you need to ensure and stability in the offshore wind market for the future?
Okay, and maybe we can sort of really broaden that out to a broader understanding of the implications of the absolute failure of the most recent CFD auction and what that really means for the future of offshore wind. Okay, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go right to left. And first of all, places, how can we ensure places aren't left behind? So I think it's important we all cover off the skills gap, because you will have identified skills gaps, Duncan. We also then need to think about how we train people through. So I think it's worth us all talking on that. And then obviously the strike price is potentially pick up for you to pick up a new. Okay,
So first thing to say is place really does matter. The current government doesn't get it. I think there's a huge opportunity with the energy transition to get it. Amongst our membership, we do still represent a lot of people who work in thermal power generation. And I think everybody knows the language of just transition, but where are the examples of just transition? I think that is the challenge, actually, for all of us. So it can be done. It can be done through support for skills, support for people who may want to relocate. It can be done, it can improve by bringing in a wider range of people to do good quality jobs. The lesson from previous examples of industrial transition is there has never been a plan, and there's never been proper preparation for it. And people have been left to deal with the consequences. And that's the lesson we have to learn. And it is about working in partnership, and it's about working together in good time. And actually, the Green Jobs Task Force had some sensible things to say about that. And it's about unions, employers, and local delivery agencies working together. There are one or two examples of good just transition that have taken place on a relatively small scale. For example, we work with EDF Energy on the transition from West Burton, and lots of our members went into other parts of the EDF business. Now, that's just a small scale example, but with a will and mobilization and a determination to make it happen, it can happen. One of the issues is when we look at the skills, engineering skills, project management skills, data skills, they are applied in different contexts, and sometimes there is a skills gap. But sometimes there isn't such a big skills gap as people imagine there to be, because we use different language, we talk about these skills in different ways, in different parts of the industry. And so it's important that we think about that and really define what the gap is. And of course, part of the problem is that there isn't a common recognition or accreditation for skills across the sector. So that's something very practical that can happen. So in short, it is important. This has to be an agenda for everywhere. It has to be pre-planned. We have to work in partnership, and we have to talk about the reality, not the perception.
Thanks for that, Sue. And maybe when we come back to the final summary, one thing I'd be quite interested to understand is very much now, and obviously unions are there to protect workers' pay, conditions, rights. But do we have to change the way that we negotiate from one that's positional to much more a directional form of negotiation? And does that come back about actually a properly funded pathway? Maybe it'd be good to think about that for the wrap up. Duncan.
I fully agree with what Sue said, and place is incredibly important. This transition is going to accelerate. So if you think it's been fast in the last 10 years, it's going to get faster. So that gap of an overall view that goes across all the sectors that are going to have to make this transition one way or the other, in one aspect or the other, that connects it at a regional level. And then I think it's a lot of this is actually quite simple. It's about getting organized and making it simple and bringing together the employees, the authorities, the education and training providers on a regional basis, and closing those gaps that some form of cross-sectoral workforce plan identifies. I think if we can do that, and I recognise it hasn't happened before, and it's because it's more difficult than it sounds. I think that gives us the best chance. And maybe I'd also just answer the second question as part of this, because it's quite closely linked. What are the skills gaps that we see in our company, in our part of the transition? We see actually a massive range of gaps. We're just growing, so we just need everything. But some of those jobs are specific and technical, like high-level electrical skills. Some of them are consenting. It's actually an incredible range of the full suite of roles that businesses employ. And if I look at where our people have tended to come from, there's a lot that have come out of conventional power. Guy who runs our East Coast Hub in Grimsby used to run a coal-fired power station, and we benefit enormously from the heritage and the skill and the learning that industry has brought to our industry as we grow up. So power sector, maritime sector, ports, oil and gas, those are the ex-forces as well, actually, and those are the transitions that I see taking place every day, and that we need, and that will feed that next phase.
Thanks for that, Duncan. That's a really interesting thought about almost passporting through the legacy learning from those old industries.
We can only do it on the back of the legacy learning.
Fantastic. Okay, so
well, on the Ashfield question, so let's call that the debate, the Ashfield question. You're absolutely right, and part of the programme that we've set out is a British jobs bonus, which is £500 million for each of the first 5 years of its existence, and those are capital grants to incentivise those people who are developing clean areas that were historically tied to coal, oil and gas. So we want to proactively incentivise people to place in areas where we need it most. So very interested to have a conversation about Ashfield and the surrounding areas, and what it is you think that you need, because that is going to be what we're going to have to do going forward. Did you want me to talk about contracts for difference? Or are you doing that? Yeah. So I mean, the contracts for difference is a tricky one, and all I'd say is that the industry had been warning government that this was going to happen, and these things are complicated. It's very, and I'm sure others will know more than me, but it seemed to me that the government just wasn't listening to what industry was telling them, and they could have taken action as Ireland did and made a difference there. And I think if you're not listening to business, if you've got your fingers in your ears, then that's what happens. And I think going forward, what Labour really wants to do is make sure we're listening, because the industry will tell us what we need to know.
thanks for Duncan. Did you want to come out on the strikeout price?
Yes, I will. And first thing I would say is, actually, up to this point, we've had a very good track record of moving every single one of our our development projects that has come through the planning system into operation. There are some pretty serious headwinds here today. We didn't have any project eligible to bid in the recent auction. That was because our project that's called Hornsey 4 didn't make it through the planning system in time to qualify and be eligible. So there's a whole basket of challenges that we're working on here. I think that missed auction is a pretty significant misstep. It comes on the back of some very challenging circumstances for the projects that won contracts the year before in the previous price auction, and you know what we've seen since that moment is a dramatic change in the external landscape, massive increase in the cost of capital, massive increase in uncertainty, and a lot of very specific inflation pressures. So it is as challenging now, or more challenging, I would say, than I can remember for renewables in the last 20 years. So we've really got a very specific set of circumstances. We absolutely now must sort it out for next year's awards of these contracts. These contracts are a device for giving long-term line of sight to an investor who's got to invest in infrastructure assets that will way outlive any government, any policy, and extend way beyond the current horizon of trading on the electricity markets. So they're a decent mechanism for supporting investment, but we've got it badly wrong in the mechanism for allocating them to projects. And right now, we need to move away from a design of a mechanism that was there to drive the problem of the last decade, which was getting costs down, maturing an industry. We've done that. The problem now is deploying at pace and establishing the certainty that means the supply chain can invest. Just think, what we're talking about here is big infrastructure projects, and you deliver those through supply chains that have their own line of sight. What you can't do is wait several years for an awards process to crystallize, then wait for a funding process to mature, and then say, supply chain, go. That doesn't work. They need the certainty and the line of sight. And for all policymakers, the single most influential thing you can do today to get the cost of future electricity down is to provide policy certainty. Policy certainty translates to lower risk for investors, and that translates to lower cost for the infrastructure and for the energy. That's the single most important thing.
Absolutely, and the issue of certainty, the absolute impact of the government flip-flopping, and this where you have the capacity to create certainty in such an uncertain world, to actually then throw it all up in the air is just almost criminal in its outcome. So did you want to come back on anything particular?
Well, just briefly to say, we really welcome Labour's intention to introduce or have the ability to introduce non-price factors into the auction price. I think that's really important. Look, from a union point of view, I get the idea about bringing down the prices, but we have been worried for quite a while that the prices are being driven to a level which is unsustainable for a variety of reasons, but including the fact that if you drive prices down to that level, where is the capacity within your contract to train, develop and upskill people? And we've been told that that has been under pressure as well. So what we don't want to see is a trade-off between the auction price and the long-term ability of this really important industry to recruit, develop and upskill people and to create those good quality jobs which will help the economy and help everybody. So the idea that you will introduce some non-price factors, I think, is really welcome. I agree with everything that Duncan said, but from a good quality jobs point of view, that's what we're concerned about too.
Okay, colleagues, thank you for that, Sue. And I think that is a really important message out to anyone who's thinking through the commissioning process of any transition period. Build in and ensure you understand developing skills does cost, and that has to be in the price. Okay, I will take the lady in red top at the back, the gentleman with the jacket on next door but one, and then the other gentleman there. And if we have chance for quick fire, we can come back. And if not, I will apologise to all you gentlemen in that corner there. I was trying to work around the room.
Hi, I was really pleased to hear you mention the jobs at Hinkley Point C, because I've been down there a few times to meet the workers. I think it's really fantastic what's happening there, and hope that they will then transition that work over to Sizewell B if that ever gets over the line. As we know, there are lots of issues going on there. My question really is, so we know that we're closing a lot of nuclear capacity in the UK because the sites are being decommissioned because they're old. So the sites that we're building at Hinkley Point C and Sizewell C will just about replace that closing capacity. It will not help overly with decarbonisation because we need to build more. Now, it's great that we're building renewables, but obviously these do have to go hand in hand with nuclear capacity. Should we be more ambitious in building more sites? We've had sites like Wilfer in Wales fall through. Government has not been able to secure a deal for workers there. I've been there to speak to workers as well, former workers who say the area is so deprived without the Wilfer power plant there. They're desperate to have another reactor there. There is bipartisan support in Wales, across parties in Wales, and the Welsh government has asked to have support there. And again, the UK government has failed them. How do we get these projects off the ground? How are we going to decarbonise if we're not building more of these reactors? And also, how are we going to meet the job demands for the teams at Hinkley?
Okay, there's probably about 10 questions.
No, it's one question, which is, should we be building more nuclear capacity? Should we be more ambitious about it?
Sorry, where are you from?
I'm from Exeter.
No, I just, sorry, you didn't give your name and your organisation.
My name's Zion Lights. I'm a science communicator and a long-term environmental activist.
Okay, thanks. The gentleman next to Matt. Okay.
Hi, my name's Mark English. I'm from European Movement UK and a Labour Party member in Oxfordshire. The UK clearly can't compete with the US in terms of financial muscle to put behind industrial policy. The UK is also not any longer in the single market with the advantages that brings in terms of connections and supply chains. How can it make up those two gaps with the US and the EU respectively?
Very good point. And Matt, can you remember who the third? I'm sure this guy.
The one.
Okay.
Hi, Joe Hackett, Mineral Products Association. There's a lot of potential for green jobs in historically energy-intensive industries, net zero manufacturing. But how can we keep energy-intensive industries like cement, which I represent, competitive and prevent them being undercut by imports while we make this transition? And particularly, what do the panel think about the idea of introducing a carbon border adjustment mechanism like the EU is planning to do in 2026?
Thank you for that, colleagues. So a number of mechanisms to potentially accelerate net zero. Sarah, can I come to you first?
Yes. No, I'm very keen to go to Hinkley to see what's being done and to learn more about it. And of course, nuclear has to be part of the answer, and we need to make sure we've got mixed supplies from different areas to meet that very complex mix of what do you do when the sun's not shining and the wind's not blowing, and we need to store the energy, and we need to and we need to do that in real time, so we're getting power to people who need it. So I think it's absolutely part of the solution, and very keen to learn more. My colleague Jeff Smith is also new to the brief, and he is looking at our nuclear policy specifically, so I'm working with him on that. I think in terms of Mark's question and the challenges, I mean, I think possibly the biggest challenge is that we've had a government that hasn't had a plan or a strategy, and has walked away from supporting our businesses for the last 13 years. And I think that is the bigger struggle, and I think that's what we need to fix. You're right to highlight problems and barriers that are in place, and the whole context, the whole point of a lot of what Rachel was saying was where there are barriers, we need to remove them. So when it comes to the US, of course, we're not going to we're not going to be on the scale of the US, but we can be world leaders. We are world leaders in lots of different ways because we're a brilliant country. We just need to remove the barriers. So we need to make sure the national grid is there. We need to make sure the planning is there. We need to make sure that the pump priming of bringing in private sector investment is there from the state. And I think that's part of the answer. And in terms of cement and energy intensive industries and your question, I'll just say that I'd be very happy to talk to you more about that. I'm not going to claim to be an expert when it comes to cement at this point in my 5-week in career, but I would love to talk more because of course we need to understand all of these things, and everything is going to be about talking to business and talking to industry about how we make sure we get the right balance in the right way. So very happy to talk.
Thanks. Duncan?
Yeah, so on nuclear, clearly nuclear is part of our energy mix, and it will continue to be. Look at the Climate Change Committee. I think your question is really about, are we going to meet, fall short of, or exceed that level? And I think that will be all about execution. That will be about reliable, timely delivery at cost. And we've seen how important the cost of the units of electricity produced are. So I think that's the challenge in front of that part of our energy mix. I think in terms of competing on an international stage, where we got to know exactly how we can compete. What are the strategies that work for our country? What I see is that we can compete by creating a better environment for investment. Our company, we've invested £15 billion into UK infrastructure over just over 10 years from a standing start. We can create an attractive inward investment environment. It's about simplicity, predictability, and certainty. It's about allocating risks to the right place, and that clarity. We've still got the chance now. We haven't thrown it all away. We can do that. And our company alone wants to double that inward investment in the next 2 to 3 years. I'd like to make that next commitment, and then all of that capital be deployed. So another 15, 16 billion before the end of this decade. So we're ready and we're poised. What we need is a simple, predictable, reliable framework that invites that investment. And then on cement, and I think other energy intensive industries, as you say, a lot of that is a necessary part of supply chain, necessary part of our society, a necessary part of delivering the transition. I think as buyers, we've got a really important part to play to be really clear about our requirements. There's a lot of buying power, if you like, in setting requirements, and we're all need to decarbonize not just our scope 1 and scope 2, but our scope 3 as well. So working with supply chains on supply chain solutions, I think there are some which are going to be technically and from a science and engineering point of view more difficult than others. And I think CBAM, Carbon Border Adjustment Model, is probably the best of the ideas out there for avoiding uncompetitivity by doing the right thing locally or in one country or in one company. I think it's a good idea.
Do we need to be more ambitious? We need to be more ambitious for the whole of our energy policy, not for any single source, because the scale of the challenge is huge. So for sure, we need more ambition. And that means that investors need more certainty and that we need to get on with it. So if you look at the example of Great British Nuclear, I think that's an example of something that's well-intentioned, that is under-resourced, too narrow in scope, and doesn't have the authority to make things happen. What we're looking for is a Labour government with a bigger GB energy that will fill those gaps and actually drive that forward. Look, in terms of Mark's point, we're not the size of the US or the EU, so we can't directly transplant it. But I do think there are lessons from the approach that are applicable to the UK. And one of those is about having clarity and continuity of industrial strategy, innovation policy, and your energy strategy. They are, and they should be all of a piece, because they are the foundation for a successful economy. They are the foundation for more good jobs across the economy. I was fortunate enough to talk to some US unions earlier this year, and what is also clear is that partnership between government and unions and business is working well. And actually having that certainty and having that ambition, such a contrast between here, the energy, the drive it creates, which we are just lacking here. When you've got that certainty, when you've got that ambition, can all work together. And finally, in relation to cement, look, it's no part of our agenda to see supply chain jobs offshore. That is absolutely not where we want to be. So we need to take the necessary action to make sure that doesn't happen. Yeah. But again, I think that's an important part of it, having an industrial strategy which recognises that different players have different things to contribute. There isn't a one-size-fits-all approach. What is right for your industry is going to be different to what we need in the domestic sector. And actually, so we need some engagement and listening. And I think Sarah's told us that is what Labour will do.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And thanks for that. And again, I think both, Sue, it's interesting you said that, because Sarah, actually having a leader who says they're there to listen, and I've been 5 weeks in the job, and what I actually want to do is hear from you, is really lovely and refreshing. Thank you. Colleagues, I am going to disappoint my 3 questionnaires in the corner, partly because, but please, all of you who would like to continue this debate and continue this debate with Sarah, we have the Warwickshire Manufacturing Group's event happening in here, supposedly at 2:30. We're going to try and bring that forward. I think certainly for colleagues sector-specific queries, WMG have been working with SMEs across certainly my region, and also with some innovators to actually find some really positive solutions. So please join us for that debate, and we're going to aim to kick that off at 14:20, because Sarah's going to have to be back in the hall for Ed Miliband's speech at 3. So hopefully see you all in 14:20. But can I just thank all of my panelists? It was a lovely conversation to be part of.